Welcome to the Lobster Talks podcast by Lobster Capital, where we celebrate the bold thinkers and innovators driving change in the startup world. I'm your host, Gabriel Jarrison, and today I'm thrilled to have Piero Nunez del Risco, the founder of Pana. Piero, welcome to the show.
Hey, happy to be here.
Awesome. I'm excited to get started. So you're the founder of Pana, a fast-growing YC startup. Tell us what Pana is for people who don't yet know about Pana.
Sure, yeah. So Pana is a digital bank or a digital banking app for US Hispanics, for the 62 million US Hispanics. We allow them to open their first bank account. We focus on that first crucial year when they arrive into the US, where it's hard to get an SSN or an IT number. And we help them open a bank account and send remittances overseas.
That's awesome. That's a huge problem. So that's Pana. Tell us more about you. And we're going to much deeper into Pana and what you do. And especially something that I'm excited to talk about today is the very cool marketing techniques and growth loops that you use to grow so quickly. But before that, tell us about you. What's your background? How did you come to building Pana?
So I'm kind of like the black sheep of my family. My family comes from the TV media industry, TV, advertising, you name it. And I actually even tried some TV stuff on my own when I was younger. But I really loved doing business. I really loved business. And I did an internship at a bank once when I was 15. And I just loved it. I just loved banking and I just loved the dynamics behind it. And I even remember telling my then girlfriend, now wife, one day saying, I'm going to have a bank one day. And so that's when, I kicked off this journey of, let me work at big institutions so I can learn how you do things and have that mix of perspective and that enriched perspective on how to build, but also scale companies and manage them when they're big. So I started working in banking, insurance, in investment funds. And ultimately, I got this amazing job. They offered me this amazing job at Scotiabank, being their head of digital banking for all of Caribbean and Central America. And I already had done a first Fintech, a personal financial manager app. And, when I got to this point in my life with Scotiabank, that, great opportunity, you can keep scaling, you can keep growing. But I was 36 at that moment. And that's when I said, wait, if I wait 4 more years, I'm going to be 40 and I would not have done what I feel I was born to do, what I always wanted to do. And so the time is now. So I did that contrarian move that no one would do with a very good, high paying, amazing job, but I couldn't help it. This is something I don't have an option actually, because I felt I had to do this. And that's how Pana started.
That's an awesome story in itself. I want to double click on that. I'm sure you've seen many of your colleagues who didn't make the jump. So there's so many people who have great, high-paying job, and they want to start a business, but they're not able to make the jump like you did. They don't dare to do it, or maybe their wife doesn't, or their husband or whatever doesn't let them do it because there's all this financial pressure. You leave on the table such a high salary. What would you say to someone in this situation right now who's struggling to actually make the leap?
That they're probably smarter than us. They have probably they're more sane of mind than us, and that's why they're probably doing the right thing. Because, in fact, the CEO of NVIDIA was asked a couple of days ago, "Would you do it again?" And he said, "No. If I known what I know now, I would never do this again because it's so extremely hard that no one in their sane mind would do it." And he said, that's exactly one of the superpowers of entrepreneurs, that they actually ignore that risk and they say, why not? How hard could it be? And it's that naivete or that naiveness that makes you ignore a couple of aspects or risks associated with the role to say, let's do it. So, because the truth is, if I were to calculate and analyze thoroughly all the obstacles that you kind of like imagine you would go through, anyone would not dare to do it. So I think there's this drive, right? But I would definitely tell anyone in that situation that if they really feel that urge, if they really feel that drive, if they really feel that big dream type of mentality that is sometimes confused with ego or whatever, trust that instinct and plan accordingly. Know that you will march imperfectly into the future. Get used to not controlling everything and just having faith in that this thing will pan out, and definitely go for it if you feel that.
Wow, that's so inspiring. That's super cool. I agree. What you said plays into something I've believed for a long time, that not anyone can be an entrepreneur. There's some books or some YouTubers or whatever who tell you anyone can be an entrepreneur. I think that's wrong. Exactly for what you said. It's going to be much harder than you think. It's going to take much longer. So many things are going to go unplanned. So I really love what you said. For me, I would kind of summarize it: only do it if you have that strong feeling deep inside you. Because if you don't, it's going to be really, really hard to overcome everything that's going to happen to you. So thank you for that. And so you leave your job, you make the leap, you wanted a bank for a long time. And so did you immediately know, I'm going to create a new bank or a new fintech? Or did you go out and look for ideas? And then even if you want to create a bank, it doesn't necessarily look like Pana. How did you actually land on the idea for Pana?
Yeah, that's interesting. I kind of like knew exactly what I wanted to do and how to do it because of the following. Let's go back a little bit. When I did my first fintech, it was a personal financial manager, 2010s, 2013, something like that. Raised funds, build an MVP. I think it was a little bit ahead of its time. We took it to market, had a couple of thousand users. The business model was very hard to monetize, and the capital structure in my country was not there to, push that. And then the regulation was not there to convert that into maybe a neobank or that type of company. So we learned a lot. We had some successes. We had many learnings, and we had to close it. It was a very tough moment when we had to do that for us emotionally, but it made us who we are now. It made us stronger. It made us know what not to do, which is sometimes more valuable than knowing what to do. So before we closed that fintech, I did all the research of what is a neobank, how does it work, how would you go about if you had to build one, right? So I had all of this research in my head, and actually I had a folder on my computer of all of that research. So fast forward to Pana, a lot of things had shifted. I went to the US. I had a horrible experience trying to open a bank account. I realized banking was not working for immigrants or for US Hispanics. It was very clear. But I also realized that post-pandemic, people like me who had moved to the US, now we have cross-border financial lives. We have a product in the Dominican Republic, a credit card in the US. We have a financial life spread across borders, but our financial products are geographically limited. And, infrastructure in the US had evolved so much that's when I connected the dots. So I sat with Luis, my co-founder, and together we had this discussion saying, so infrastructure advanced, things changed with the pandemic. It's clearly broken. We have lifted ourselves, but we have built something like this for other markets at Scotiabank, in my case, at Rover, in his case. So we said, we truly have something. Let's go for it. So we kind of like hit the ground running from one perspective of knowing how to go about it. So that's what we did. And as soon as we started coding, we applied to YC, and we got, I think it was early admit, in fact, on January 22.
Wow, congrats. Early admit is a great, it's huge, because YC says to you, whatever startup application comes later, we want you no matter what. Like, we know right away you're going to be among the best, so we can immediately accept you, because they accept less than 1%. So they got to triage and see who they get, but they accepted you before even seeing the rest. That's a pretty huge vote of confidence. I want to come back to a couple points that you said. One is, again, to anyone following the Lobster Talks podcast, again, here we have a founder who solved his own problem. You had the problem, you came here, you saw the experience was terrible. You're like, I got to build something better. And obviously, you're not the only one moving to the US from the Latino community, but from around the world, actually. Probably Pana at some point, I don't know Pana at some point could be opened to other people moving to the US. I personally live in between France and San Francisco, and I have the same problem like you mentioned. My French banks are for France, my US banks are for the US, and it doesn't really talk. We actually see a lot of those cross-border solutions just picking up. I'm thinking about Jeeves, who's also a YC startup that I've invested in, who's now a unicorn. And they're not competing with you. They're more for companies managing employees in cross-border. I'm thinking of Deal, that's also a YC company, not in the financial sector, but also cross-border. So basically, the world is becoming smaller, and you're just kind of a new tool for the millions and millions of people who live in two different countries or who just live in the US, but they have some family or something in some other part of the world. Have you thought of, the market for Hispanics in the US is already huge, but do you have that sort of global approach as well, saying maybe someday we could, talk to Indians or Chinese or whoever moving to the US as well? Or you want to stay in that community for now?
So I think at some point it will become community agnostic, but what we focus on is on obviously making sure we serve our customers and follow what their needs are. And so far, I think along the lines of what you just were contextualizing with, on the one side, we started focusing on the first year of the US Hispanic when they come into the US and they're in the process of getting an ITIN or an SSN. So they're limited in the things that they can do, like opening a bank account. So we started making it 10 times easier. We won't stop there. In fact, we have seen that our customers are making us top of wallet, or customer primacy is something that's a kind of like the holy grail in banking. And we have customer primacy with our customer base, which is reflected on our unit economics and on our retention numbers and you name it, but mostly on that direct deposit piece. People put PAN as their payroll account, more than half of our user base.
Yeah, that's huge. Congrats.
But our customer base is non-SSN. So now we are working on how do we offer more products to this customer base who have made us their top of wallet. And so there's a huge cross-selling opportunity. But as you continue to look into the future, then you have the later stage migrant that their needs, they send $150 billion a year to LATAM when 83% of that is in cash. How do you transform that? And we believe that is creating a customer to business ecosystem where people want now to not just send cash. Now people want to invest cross border. People want to save across border. People want to buy real estate across border. People want to have multi-country products. People want to, pay for medical bills or study, academic stuff across border. So that's when we continue to see a bigger opportunity in the cross-border space. And, there's so much opportunity to improve and fix what is the infrastructure that it's out there. So our vision is to create from Toronto to the Patagonia in Chile, to create a completely seamless banking experience. It's very hard to fathom the fact that there's banks that they're international and you have a bank account with them in country A and then a bank account with them in country B, and it's two different banks. You cannot even move money from your own bank account. So that doesn't make any sense.
Crazy.
So we want to build a seamless experience from top to bottom. And it's really how it should be, because 60 million US Hispanics, it's not 60 million. It's 600 million when you count their peers, their family members, their friends, the business with whom they make business on a daily basis. And I think the cross-border activity, both personal and commercial, will just increase over time.
That's awesome. I mean, like you said, from Toronto to Patagonia, I mean, it's a continent. It's I don't know, in population, it's got to be 25% of the world. So it's huge. And then maybe you can do the second continent from London to Vladivostok. It's not vertical, it's horizontal. But with this first continent, you have so much work to do. It turns out there's such a huge Hispanic population in the US that's not news to anybody. And it's actually growing. I believe it's probably numbers I got from you. Today, it's 19% of the population across the country, and it's going towards 30 or 35 in the coming years. Is that correct?
Not just that, we are 62, 65 million today. We're going to be 100 million in a couple of decades. But it's not just that. I think there are some very interesting facts that, it's very hard to fathom and to understand. A couple of examples. Right now, the fastest growing SMB sector in the US is from the Latino cohort or demographic. You have $3.4 trillion economy when you put them all together. It will be equivalent to the 5th GDP in the world.
Wow.
Education levels are rising. So, people are getting more prepared and whatnot. You also can see the golden age. The golden age is when the majority of its adult population is between 30 and 40, which is the most productive decade. So you have a strong part of that, or the majority of that population in that decade. So I think that's enough. But if you want to look at a completely uncorrelated aspect, you just have to look at the top charts of artists. Bad Bunny is like number one in the world. And this tells you a lot about the culture, how it's stirring, and how, US Hispanics are not just having a economic impact, but a geographic
cultural impact.
And I think the most important piece is that these folks are not just here to benefit from the US. They're creating more jobs than they're taking, and they're generating more revenue, more wealth that they're taking. So, this cohort is helping build America.
Obviously.
And this is one of the reasons I came here. And hopefully we're on track to make our IPO and build our story.
I mean, it's good that you mentioned that. I believe, people who know business are smart enough, everyone is, to know that despite what some people are saying, the vast majority, 99.9% of people coming to the US come here to work, to contribute to the country, and they have their own interests as well. Obviously, they want to make money, but while making money, they're contributing to the country. So we should remind that to everyone. If it's not obvious, it is for you and me. But it's fascinating. You sort of happen to be on one of the fastest growing segment, one of the most fascinating. And maybe you can touch a little bit on why. So there's the part of, if you don't have an ITIN or SSN, you're struggling with regular banks, for sure. But that's not only your customers. You don't only have without ITIN and SSN. That's where you started, you focused. Now you get people who have jobs, who do have an SSN, who do have an ITIN. They still make you as their primary bank. How do you compete? Because I know you're doing a lot of creative stuff. Maybe you can talk about some of them, about serving your customers in a way that's not only about, we're the bank for the new SSN. You're actually much more than that. Can you maybe give a couple of examples on how you're really kind of going beyond that for them?
Absolutely. I think it's not just the non-SSN, which is a huge struggle, as you said. For many people, it's trust, it's language barriers, it's familiarity or the lack of thereof. And we are glad that our customers are seeing in Pana a safe haven, a brand that feels familiar and that obviously talk to its needs and wants. And one of the places we have found one of our growth drivers is which is very fulfilling to serve, is on the payroll piece. We've been working with SMBs, and these SMBs, small businesses, Hispanic-owned SMBs, they're doing very well. They're growing. They're doing very well from a business perspective. In fact, they have asked us to serve them, but we don't focus on business right now, but definitely something to explore in the future. We have been helping them bank and open bank accounts for 50% of their payroll, which is underbanked. So, and the reason why it is so, and those folks even have an SSN or have an ITIN, those employees, but they just don't want to cross the street to this big bank, incumbent bank, and papers and someone treating them like that they don't care for their business. And, I think we've all been there. Not only feeling like you need to start from scratch, like you're no one, we need to start, you're building your credit history. But even when you are here and you look different and you speak different, just having those struggles of feeling like you deserve a premium service. And that's what we offer them. Even people who can access a bank account in the US, we are offering them a premium service, a service that makes them feel that they belong the way it should be. So we've been helping migrate payrolls. We've been helping small business owners. We've been helping online sellers because their shoppers sometimes lack a payment method. So we're helping them enable a payment method to their customer base so they can sell more and reduce costs and reduce losses.
I mean, it's just treating customers like they belong, like you're one of them, and they're not treated differently because they, like you said, maybe they have an accent or maybe they don't have the same culture. That's good. It goes a long way. It's interesting. Maybe sometimes you don't need fancy stuff. I mean, you do need for a banking app that it works well, etc. But just the way you treat your customers is something I've been personally thinking a lot about recently, and again, goes a very, very long way. So going back to what you said, you launched the app, you applied to YC, you got in immediately. Then what happened? Tell us a little bit about the story. You got into YC. Did you already had a live product, or did you launch it during or after YC? How were the first month with traction? Like, tell us the story.
Yeah, so we joined YC and we were still developing. We were still building the app. And obviously you get into the YC rush of, reporting on building that accountability and showing progress as you head into demo day. And obviously amazing as it is, we learned a lot and got to a point where we obviously had a first version, this MVP, and we launched at demo day. The September 2022 demo day was kind of like, I think, was not one of the best ones because the 2021 rush, that was due to the zero interest rate policy era plus COVID, created this huge outflow of investments in 2021. I think by the time we went out to start fundraising, that's when they closed the door on that era. So it was harder than ever. Optimist as we are, because we're entrepreneurs, I think we saw that as a blessing in disguise. And we not only became extremely frugal, we had the support of amazing investors, which I know was extremely valuable for us. But it made us realize that you got to think of businesses on a profitable scale from day one and not just burn cash. You got to be frugal. And that's what we did. And, we launched and the infrastructure was a challenge. So we took a contrarian view of ditching that middleman, that banking as a service, and we decided to go direct to bank. So we had to build our own infrastructure. And at that moment, Silicon Valley went down. Investment was completely dry. It was the worst moment possible, not only to raise cash, but to jump into an endeavor of building a bigger infrastructure even before you've been able to scale. But that's when the contrarian view kicks in. And I said, thing is, if we keep doing the same as everyone else, we will just be just like them, but a step behind. Yes, this is riskier what we're about to do, but we are going to be much better than them when we come out, and we're going to leapfrog. And that's what we did. We built our own direct-to-bank infrastructure, which was a very painful moment during 2023. And end of 2023, we launched what is now considered one of the best infrastructure there is out there. Now, our competitors would love to have the infrastructure that we have, that we built for that past year. So we were kind of like right on that front. And now numbers are showing. Now we're growing exponentially better. Now we're able to serve on a very differentiated mode our customer base. We're able to scale. We're able to move faster, better unit economics, more revenue, more efficiency. And so we're glad we make that decision. Now we're about to launch a new product, and it's kind of like one of those, another contrarian views. I'm excited to share in the next couple of weeks, but we're going to double down on making sure we have the ear of our customer present. or the voice of our customer in our ear and making sure that we're building for them. And that's kind of like what's been going on.
That's awesome. I mean, again, such a lesson for entrepreneurs listening to us. It usually gets worse before it gets better. Or you could say it differently, when things are tough, if you survive, you're going to come out much stronger on the other side. So it's all about surviving. Obviously, the past year and a half, maybe 2 years, have been troublesome for a lot of startups who are struggling to fundraise. And actually, it's getting sort of better now, but we're still not out of the woods. And it might come back in the future. Maybe someone is listening to this podcast in 2038 when there's another liquidity crisis. And so my view is, whatever you do, survive. Just don't die and just leave to fight another day. Actually, your view is probably even better than that, is don't die, but also you're going to build something even better. You're going to take that, struggle and transform it. So again, you're probably out of the woodwork for you right now. You're out of the woods. It's going better. But for someone who's still struggling right now, there are some startups who still are struggling to fundraise or have other difficulties. Maybe it's regulatory for certain, startups in particular. What would be your advice for them? Do you believe in my advice, just don't die? Or do you actually advise them to, go harder? What would you tell them right now?
So going back to what I said before, sometimes challenges are a blessing in disguise, either on the regulatory turmoil or on the funding turmoil, or whichever of the challenges that you could face nowadays. And I say this because there's a couple of things very powerful when building a company. One of them is when an idea got its moment, when it's a thing of timing. There's something magical about that that's very strong. That's one. But there's other one, which is when the survival instinct is one of the strongest things on earth. When you need to make your startup work, and this happened to the guys from Airbnb when they had to sell cornflakes to just make some revenue, and you see this everywhere. You just don't hear about most of these stories, but the survival instinct brings out the best out of a great team. So I think whatever challenges you may face, yes, try to not die, but seize that moment and that opportunity to bring out that best of you. And if you truly say, hey, I am not dying, trust me, and you follow through on that, you will figure it out, man. Even if that inspires someone to, say, you know what, I'm going to help this folk, because it's hard, but that's how it works.
And it's interesting what you just said very briefly. Maybe it inspires someone to help you. Having such grit, having such determination usually inspires people. And being a founder is also bringing people into your vision. Obviously investors, but also employees and everyone else.
I usually joke about how a startup really feels like. At the beginning, day one, you have an idea, right? And it's a very crude, raw idea, and it feels like you're singing a cappella. It's like, happy birthday. No one's following. Everyone's looking at you like. That's when you share your idea
really
first,
cool.
and it was like, yeah, sure, cool. And then you just keep going a cappella, and there's this crazy other person who's just as crazy as you that says, yeah, you know what, I'll sing with you, and now you're two, right? And now you're singing, and at least that's a couple, right? But then it's starting to take rhythm, and then you have a group, and they have a room, and then you have a crowd, and then you're this choir then, and then obviously at a point, there's a point where everyone's jumping on board. It makes all the sense in the world, and everyone's singing along with you, and it's a million people choir. But at the beginning, it feels like you're singing a cappella, and you just have to keep going until people crazy enough like you just start jumping on board.
That's really cool. This example is the first time I hear that. It embodies really everything about the social dynamic of building an idea. At the beginning, people are like, this guy is crazy, just like you would be if you're singing in the street. So that's absolutely amazing. As you know, I'm moving on to another topic. As you know, I chose to only back YC startups. I really believe in YC very, very much because I believe it's exceptional startups and what they bring to the startup. So going back to when you got started and when you launched Pana, you said you had the YC brush and it helped you. What would you say did YC bring you when you went through the program?
So there are many things. So number one, the community. The community is, it's hard to, put in words, but from day one that you get into the program, you start meeting people, and everyone you talk to is really smart and, has this pledge to just help each other out. And you feel that, right? That authentic drive to help you out. And that community is very strong. And after you finish YC, that's the strongest piece, right? That community is your family, and you're actually protected by that group one way or the other. Two, the group partners. I think you can have, the different type of group partners, right? Hopefully you get the one that is more aligned with your startup, which is likely to happen. And when that happens, definitely this is something that will bring a lot of value to the startup, especially because it's going to help you trim your message, not only from a verbal perspective, but from a cognitive perspective, and make sure you focus on what you have to. Three, there's so much resources that they provide you with that you can always go back and look for this. And this is not just for demo day. When you're going to raise your Series A, you still, have this database or this centralized information nucleus that you can access, and peers that you can talk to and get intros and whatnot. So it's really, really a life-changing experience, and definitely one that, it was a dream to get into YC. And no, it really was exactly or even much better than what we expected, right?
That's awesome. I mean, I think it should be a dream for startups to get in. And for many entrepreneurs, it is, rightfully so. Always like to hear your experience. So thank you for that. Tell us a little bit before we wrap up. I have a couple more questions for you. I'd like to know first, where is Pana now? What have you done in the past 2 years almost that you launched? Whatever you can share with us. And then what's your vision for the future of Pana? What are you excited about for what's coming next?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Pana, since we started or launched our first version in Q3 2022, we've been testing, building, shipping, testing, iterating, taking user feedback and iterating on that feedback and building up on that. And that led us to find our product market fit. And you can obviously see that growth trend when we did reach that PMF. And, while it's very exciting and it's very good and it's a very good momentum, now is when you need to seize that momentum to take it to the next level. So, now we're excited to launch a new product, which is going to obviously cater to needs that we've detected on our user base. And we're excited to launch that in the next couple of weeks. We'll reach out with a note, obviously, to hopefully to your audience to share the news. So excited about that. And that's coming in the next couple of weeks. As we look into the near future, obviously, we're looking to further now fuel that growth. Now that we have optimized our unit economics, our payback, our margins, where do you get customers? How does it work? What's the payback? Now that and the infrastructure, the best infrastructure out there is in place. Now you put fuel on that machine and the machinery, and you start growing. So looking forward to that. And as I said before, we cater to recent migrants. We look to continue to offer new products to that base. Then you focus on later stage migrants, and then we continue to connect these folks with their family members in Latin America. So one way or the other, we can continue that vision of creating a completely seamless banking experience from Toronto to the Patagonia. So that's what we're focusing on.
From Toronto to Patagonia, again, I love that. It's a great expression because it's so visual. I like to ask this question to people on the podcast. Is there a specific quote or a specific book that you can recommend for us? Ideally, something that has had a big impact on you, that has stayed in your mind for a very long time, either a book that you read or just a quote that you live by that we could get inspiration from.
I think the beauty of books is that hopefully one gets a book that is what you need to read at that moment in your life, especially from that self-help perspective or inspiration perspective. In my case, I think the first one in that series of books was The War of Art. Not The Art of War, no. The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. It really helped me divide and understand that difference between the self and the ego, which millions of books somehow address. But this was from an artist perspective, and it debunked what an artist is. Even a customer support or a plastic surgeon could be considered an artist from his definition. And it really separated that. And, it talks to the entrepreneur to bring that artist piece of you, which lives in the self and not in the ego. It helps you separate both so you can understand that you are not your thoughts, understand that you shouldn't live by your ego, that image, but by that self drive where your inner artist lives. And in my case, it helped me build a thicker skin. So, we can continue this path because as an entrepreneur, we tend to be more emotional, but we're in for a huge roller coaster where we need to have that thick skin to be able to, get across. So definitely that book made a huge difference in my life.
That's awesome. Thank you for that recommendation. I want to ask you a follow-up question. Do you think entrepreneurs are artists?
Do I think entrepreneurs are artists? Yes, I definitely, by all means.
That's cool. Well, it's great. It's a great idea. It's a great definition. Well, Piero, it's clear you're passionate about financial inclusion for Latinos in the US. For those interested to learn more, where can they find out more about Pana and about you online?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Pana, you can find it at joinpana.com. You can find me at LinkedIn, Piero Nunez del Risco. And yeah, be happy to get any feedback if you guys like it or feel anything that we should be doing.
Awesome. Just bring on the feedback for Piero. Well, thank you so much for being with me today for this conversation. It was amazing. Obviously, wishing all the best to Pana, which you don't need because you're already killing it.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you so much, man. And thank you so much for the support as always.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks again. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe for more conversations like this. And don't forget to rate us and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time on the Lobster Talks, stay bold, stay curious, and remember, those big ideas start somewhere.